So we have a little chemin running along the side of our garden, and in between us and the woodland. You can probably just see there the dead hedge that we've started building on the edge of the woodland. And today we're going to just take a little walk up the chemin and see how many forage plants we can find. There's all sorts of edible things that you can pick from the countryside or from the roadsides at this time of the year. And interested to see how many different plants we've got up here. I'm not going to walk and talk because it makes the camera too wobbly. I can see I'm going to be joined by somebody in a moment, but we'll take a close look at all the different plants we can find. Just here we've got wild strawberry. They're just coming into flower, so we won't have any fruits till later on, but these produce very, very tiny little strawberries that are really intense in flavour. And they're wonderful to come out on a morning and pick them, have them with your breakfast. They look exactly like regular strawberries, but the flowers are smaller. The name in French is Feuille du Bois, which means strawberry of the woods, and they generally grow in semi-shade along hedgerows and into the margins of woodlands. These have sort of naturalised along here. They've actually escaped from our garden. But this is a really good environment for them. So a very common plant, probably the first plant that we all learn to recognise because of its stinging properties, and we know to avoid it, especially if you're wearing shorts, but it makes great soup. You just need to pick the tips, just the very young shoots. At this time of year is perfect. You might want to wear gloves, but nettle stings don't really bother me. And yeah, they make a lovely soup, but I've also made nettle fritters. They're pretty good too, and it's rich in iron. Once it's cooked, you don't feel the sting, that's kind of neutralised. But I shall pick some and make a nice soup. So here we've got, this is Pulmonaria officinalis, or lungwort as they call it. It's not particularly edible. I mean, the flowers are edible, but they look quite nice on salads. But it was used as a herbal remedy for lung diseases, and in the olden days, people thought that if a plant resembled a body part or an illness, then it would cure that disease. And the leaves on the pulmonaria have these spots like diseased lungs, and for that reason it was used to treat that disease, and it gives it the name pulmonaria. So here we have some primrose, the native primrose growing. You can see a couple of different variants there with the pink ones and some almost white ones, and the flowers can be eaten. They're edible flowers. You can use them on salads, or you can crystallise them for decorating cakes and that sort of thing. I'm not going to pick these flowers because I think they're just beautiful in the countryside. This little plant here is called red dead nettle. It's not a true nettle, and that's the reason for its common name of being a dead nettle. I mean, it's clearly alive, but they don't sting. But you can use the very growing tops, just like that, to make a pesto, and it's actually pretty good. And pinching the top off like this isn't going to harm the plant, it'll just make it grow back again from the base. Here's a nice big patch of red dead nettle. I shall have some more of that to make my pesto. So what we've got here are wild leeks, and I use them like chives really, but some of them get quite big at the base, and then you can use them like baby leaves. None of these are quite big enough yet, but they look a little bit like a leek or a spring onion, and they can be used in exactly the same way, and they're great. The tops are great for chives. So here we have one of my favourite forage plants. This is sorrel. It looks a little bit like a small dock leaf, and in fact it is related to the dock. But these have a really lovely sort of citrusy, slightly lemony flavour, and you can make sorrel soup, and you can make sauce, and you can also use them as fritters as well. They're recognisable by this spearhead shaped leaf, but you've got to be very careful not to mistake it for arum, which I'll find one in a minute and show you, which has a very similar shaped leaf but is actually poisonous. But sorrel is one of my favourite forage plants because sorrel soup is delicious. So here we've got an example of an arum growing right next to a sorrel plant, and this is where you've got to be really careful because the leaves can look very similar. The arum also have that spearhead shape. When you compare it to a sorrel, sorrel tends to be much longer than it is wide, but the young arum leaves look very, very similar, although if you compare them, the sorrel is more deeply veined and hasn't got quite such a shine on the surface. Some arum leaves have black marks on them, and that makes them very easy to identify. But you do need to really make sure that you're identifying the plants correctly because arum, all parts are poisonous, the berries in particular. If we look at the back of the leaf, again the sorrel veins are much more pronounced, and the arum has a shiny surface on the back. This leaf over here is even more similar. It's got the points at the bottom of the leaves, but again it tends to be broader in relation to the length of it. Here we've got wild garlic just nestling in the base of this tree here. Again, you could mistake this for arum, but this one has a very, very powerful smell of sort of onions or garlic. I'm not particularly a big fan of it, but lots of people are. You can make pesto from it, you can use it as a garlic substitute, and later on it produces a little starry white flower or cluster of flowers, and you can also eat those. They're very decorative on a salad. But again, you can make little fritters out of them. Let's have a couple more of those. So dandelions are also edible. You can eat the young leaves in salads. The older leaves get a little bit too bitter, but the young leaves are nice in salads. But you can also use the flowers. I mean, you can use them to decorate things, but we've made some dandelion flower scones and some dandelion flower fritters. I'm not going to pick them today because there's only 2 or 3. They're only just started to open, but they're pretty tasty, and they're a lovely colour too. Oh look, and I shall leave them for the bees. So I've come to the top end of our garden now, and I've just spotted all these clumps of wild leeks. As you can see, they're very, very upright and a sort of glaucousy grey blue colour, so they're quite easy to distinguish from clumps of grass. Even when they're growing amongst the grass, they're quite distinctive, and seems like they're spreading really nicely up here. And finally, we've got celandine. This isn't an edible plant. I'm not suggesting that you should eat this. But it's interesting because the other common name for it is pilewort, and very similar to the pulmonaria or lungwort, it was used to treat hemorrhoids, hence its common name of pilewort. And the reason they thought that it would treat hemorrhoids was because the roots, well, they look a little bit like piles, and you make this into a cream, and well, apply it to the appropriate places.